Major funding for Charlie Rose is provided by DuPont, originator of products and ideas that make a difference in everyday life. DuPont, better things for better living. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and the annual financial support of viewers like you. Charlie Rose is also made possible by these funders.
Welcome to our broadcast. Tonight we'll explore 25 years of the gay rights movement and the legacy of the Stonewall riots of 1969. First, I'll be joined by the author of The History of Stonewall, by a participant in the riots, and by a lesbian feminist leader. Then we'll have Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Tony Kushner and others who will join me to continue our discussion, taking the movement up until today and the future. Finally, actor Ian McKellen will be here. We began with a look at the meaning of Stonewall. On June 28, 1969, a riot broke out at the Stonewall Bar in Greenwich Village. The gay patrons, who were used to raids on bars where they chose to meet, decided if they wouldn't take it anymore. Men in dresses kicked up their heels as lesbians and others threw bricks and coins at the police. After 5 days of riots, a modern gay rights movement was born. Joining me now are historian Martin Duberman, author of Stonewall, riot participant Jim Farrat, a contributing editor at Spin Magazine and a co-founder of ACT UP, and Barbara Smith, co-founder and publisher of Kitchen Table, Women of Color, press and editor of Homegirls. I'm pleased to have all of you here and to have this opportunity to take a look not only at the history, but where, in fact, the gay movement is going, the gay and lesbian movement is going. You were there. Tell me about it.
Well, first of all, I'd like to, there's so many romantic myths about Stonewall, particularly in the media. I'd like to say a couple of actual things which are Judy Garland.
Have I contributed to it at all here in my opening remarks?
Yes, men in dresses. Men in dresses. No men in dresses.
There were no men in dresses there?
There were men in dresses. There were transvestites.
Okay. Well, wait a minute. I want to get to the argument later, but let me get to the
Judy Garland had nothing to do.
Barbara, help me out here.
I'll try.
Judy Garland had nothing to do with it.
Right.
There's a lot written and a lot of myth and a lot of plays being done that says that Judy Garland, it was because of Judy Garland that
she died the day before or something?
She was buried that morning. She had died. And number two, Stonewall Bar is not a symbol of gay liberation. It is truly a symbol of oppression. And it's a very powerful symbol of how gay and lesbian people's lives were controlled by the society that said they were worthless. This particular bar, the Stonewall Bar on Christopher Street, was about the sleaziest example of the mafia-run bars you could find in the village. It did provide a safe sanctuary for gay men and for closeted gay men in particular, for runaway kids, the kids whose parents had thrown them out of their home because they said they were gay, 15 and 16-year-old kids who had to learn how to survive on the street, sold their bodies. This was a marketplace at this bar. It was a terrible, terrible place. But inside of it, because there was no other places for homosexual men in particular to gather, and the kind of homosexual men that was not even respectable in 1969, the men who wore dresses, the black and the brown street people, the people who survived by selling their bodies because there was no place in the society for them to see themselves. There was no reflection of them. That's who was at Stonewall. Raids happened all the time in these mafia bars. Everybody knew about it. There was a little button that would be next to the door. The lights would turn off or turn on or turn their colors when the police were about to arrive, and all the patrons knew that at that point, when that red light or that white light went on, people were to stop dancing, assume heterosexual, as best they could, roles, and when the police came in, pretend it was just another Irish pub. That was what Stonewall was like. Not pretty, not nice, and it fundamentally, what happened that night fundamentally changed how lesbians and gays around the world saw themselves. And from that point forward, it was never the same.
How did it fundamentally change the way they saw themselves?
When the police came and they It was a script that had been done before. The transvestites, the drag queens, you know, made fun of the police, and the police acted like police were supposed to act in movies. They were big, tough guys, and they were going to push around the girls. The girls were the men in dresses. Not fully dressed as women because it was against the law. You had to wear some items of male apparel, or if you were a female in male garments, you had to wear some items of female apparel. And that was one of the ways the police would harass the cross-dressers. But when they chose to arrest a woman who was dressed as a man, she was called a passing woman in the 90s vocabulary, but in the vocabulary of the 50s and 60s, she was known as a bulldyke, a very masculine, butch-acting woman. When they cuffed her, and she had to play her role out of being stronger and tougher than any of the men in female clothing there, let her outside of the bar, put her in the police car that was outside. Her cuffs were very tight, and she was very angry. She got in the car. The other door was not locked. She slipped out, and at this point it was still theater. Everyone playing their usual, ordinary roles. She got out and she threw herself against the car, and I think shocked herself and shocked the queens that were outside because the car started to rock. And at that point it was a flashpoint. And all of the anger, all of that irrational anger that people had inside of them, that they were not in touch with because of oppression, came to the forefront. And it was at that moment.
All right, I'm getting to it, but let me just go to it. But what you were saying is it was what the fundamental change about the way gays and lesbians looked at themselves was that they all of a sudden saw themselves as fighting back.
As having some power.
Okay.
Some ability not to be dictated.
Martin Duberman, Stonewall is his book. What do you disagree about that reportage?
There are only two witnesses who think that it was in fact a cross-dressed lesbian who got into the initial scuffle with a policeman. Jim is one of the two. Jim has strong opinions about how and why the riot started, and also about what kind of a bar it was. Stonewall was in fact my bar of choice. I was there 2 or 3 nights a week dancing. I wasn't then, you know, a street hustler, a drag queen, a drug pusher. You know, I had tendencies in all directions, of course. But there were plenty of middle-class white men like me in that bar. A lot of us viewed it as a very interesting place, a kind of non-vanilla mix of people. It was a place where you could dance. All the bars were mafia-controlled. All of them were, to some large extent, sleazy. But Stonewall, if anything, stood out for many people in those years as being the safest of the bars. Still not a pretty place, but better than the run-of-the-mill.
So in essence, your difference is, 1, the nature of Stonewall, and 2, what started the riot.
Yeah, see, a lot of this depends. I mean, the reason eyewitness accounts differ, in this case as in all cases, is that people see from a different vantage point in the crowd. I don't doubt Jim's account. I don't doubt his veracity. But there were others who were differently positioned, who were seeing different things happen simultaneously.
And what's the significance of this beyond historical accuracy?
Well, part of it is a simple matter of credit. I mean, a lot of people, now that Stonewall has become an international symbol, a lot of people want to either take or assign the credit to a particular constituency which represents their own lifestyle or views.
What's the significance of it for you?
Of the riots themselves?
Yes.
What the riots demonstrated, there had earlier been skirmishes at other bars in California. What these riots demonstrated was that, first of all, in numbers, some of the estimates go as high as 2,000. In numbers, this was the largest resistance to the police that had yet happened. And also, it was the most sustained. It went on for a period of 5 days.
Now, did the significance of it, was it immediate, or did it take time as the word spread and it got attention, and more attention brought more attention, brought more attention?
Again, it varies with individuals. I mean, a lot of people dismissed it as, you know, just another bar raid. Others immediately saw the significance, and in fact, within days of the riots, the Gay Liberation Front was formed, and Jim indeed was one of the leaders of that.
Yeah,
and the Gay Liberation Front was quite different from the homophile movement, as it's called, that preceded the Stonewall riots.
What about, you obviously were not there, but what about the significance of of lesbians and people of color at this
Well,
event?
when I found out about Stonewall, which was in the mid-'70s when I came out, so I came out about 5 years after the Stonewall Rebellion. When I found out about it, I have always thought of it as being very much like Rosa Parks refusing to move to the back of the bus during which initiated the Montgomery bus boycotts in the 1950s. It was like a signal, mythic moment that catalyzed a movement that was bound to happen anyway. Right. So that's how I saw it, and that's what I think it has come to mean to us.
So the movement was going to happen, and this was simply...
Yes, it was absolutely
this
going
was
to
the
happen.
spark that ignited it.
Absolutely
It was
going
a
to
historic
happen.
accident in many
We
ways.
need to place it also at the end of the 60s.
That's right.
You have a decade where every minority and social group had its moment in the streets, figuratively. And lesbians and gays, like myself, had served in a lot of those movements as workers, particularly the anti-war movement. You had, in 1968, the increasing activity among young people against the war in Vietnam, 1968, 1969. You had the emergence of a women's liberation movement. You would have the civil rights movement in the early part of the 60s. It was a particular time in American history where people were coming to terms with their own oppression. I know for myself, as someone that had worked in progressive movements and on the left, I had never thought as a gay man that was that significant. I was not closeted, but I just never put my own oppression first. That night, when I happened by accident to be at the Stonewall in front of it, I was coming home from work, quite literally, when I came upon the very beginning of this. It was by accident that I was there, and I will never forget what it did for me. About 2 hours into the evening, I went to a corner phone booth and called every progressive organization that I ever worked with and said, come down to the village, gay people are rioting. Now, at that time, if anyone had put a call in and said 2 people are having an argument with a policeman on 125th Street and 5th Avenue, you would have had radicals there to support the victims, the people of this police harassment. Nobody showed up. Nobody, not one of the political groups.
Because there was no gay movement consciousness.
No, because they were
Because of homophobia. Because of homophobia. Right. I just wanted to jump in, too, because the thing is,
on the part of all the other movements, even though they were all self-described liberation movements.
Yes.
Even though I wasn't at Stonewall, I graduated from college the month that Stonewall happened. And I feel like, I mean, just like Jim, I can agree with him about that tenor of the times. I was involved in the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, which is quite unusual for a black woman because the war was seen as a white issue, although, as we found out, most of the troops who died there were men of color, working class and poor men of color. I was involved in black student organizing and in the civil rights movement before that, and I really came into the gay and lesbian liberation movement through the women's movement, which is true for many women of my generation. Lesbian feminists were leaders of the early women's liberation movement, although we often don't get credit for that. I think a lot of people who were around then or who have studied the history have heard of the Lavender Menace, and that was when Betty Friedan said that, you know, that lesbians in the movement were going to really, that is in the women's movement, were really going to undermine the gains and the goals that people were trying to make. But I guess I just want to reiterate that consciousness that people, we are of a generation, even though I wasn't at Stonewall. And the thing is, as I said, and as Jim has said, and as Marty is saying, it was inevitable that lesbian and gay people were going to rise up.
It's a certain set of messages, I think, that were coming to all of us, percolating in a semi-conscious way within us. I mean, Jim has itemized most of the movements, but in fact, the particular messages were of great importance to gays and lesbians. For example, from the black struggle, which is, you know, the grandparent of all the struggles, from the black struggle, we were hearing, it's fine to be different. Black is beautiful. You don't have to be a, you know, carbon copy middle-class white in order to be a viable human being. From the anti-war movement was coming the message, don't trust the experts. The experts got us into Vietnam. For gay people, that was a message of enormous importance because we had allowed, many of us, including myself, had allowed the experts, and especially the psychiatric experts, to rule our lives. We had internalized their view that we were sick. So all these messages, along with a lot of rage, were percolating inside of us, and that's why we all three seem to think that it was inevitable.
Did Stonewall change all of that, or did Stonewall simply say,
Change all of what?
All of those notions, all of those messages were there. That Stonewall didn't change all those messages.
It activated the message.
But to this day,
made them manifest.
But to this day, I mean, we're 25 years into a struggle. I mean, just because it's a 25th anniversary doesn't mean that things are finished. Many of the issues that people were struggling with around that time and since that time, we still have gay teenagers committing suicide. We still have people who are afraid to come out on their jobs. It's not like we're finished. Sure. But what we have that we didn't have pre that date is a viable lesbian and gay rights movement. I would like it to be a liberation movement, actually.
Well, it was a liberation movement in the beginning, and I think it's really significant. The significance of Stonewall is what happened after that flashpoint.
Which was?
Which was the organizing of the Gay Liberation Front and its counterpart around the country. Within
how about around the world? Did this have implications beyond later?
First we'll start in this country. Within 5 months, there were over 70 chapters of the Gay Liberation Front that had formed because it had caught the imagination, particularly of young people. Lesbian and gay people were coming out all over this country. Does not mean that there wasn't a movement before, but the character of the gay liberation movement was different. It reflected the values of the 60s as opposed to the values of the 50s, where you had homophile organizations, correctly, by the way, because of what had happened with McCarthy and the kind of witch hunts that McCarthy had done against homosexuals and against communists, had tried to present a very we are just like you kind of image. Well, I came from the generation that carried signs that said, we are your worst nightmare. And the fact that we were gay and lesbian, we could have been hippies, we could have been what women's liberation is. When Barbara talked about the Lavender Menace, it was the very women in the Gay Liberation Front in New York City that became the Lavender Menace and went to women's liberation and unfurled a banner and said, we are the Lavender Menace. What we gained from the women's movement fundamentally shaped the character of the gay liberation movement. That was consciousness raising. I want to put this in. It was consciousness raising. We had to examine, what does it mean to be gay? Who are we? And what does it mean to be oppressed? And what has that oppression done to us? It wasn't just gay is okay. It was, who are we? And how do we make a better society for everyone, not just gays and lesbians?
And that's being contested now.
What do you think is the most significant progress that has been made in the 25 years since Stonewall?
Well, as Barbara said, I mean, first we have to divide up where the progress has been made. I mean, once you leave the liberated urban zones, the big cities, small-town life in America, a number of reporters have gone out and looked, and it resembles all too sadly still the way life was in the 1950s. Change is beginning slowly, but a lot of people are still marrying heterosexually in order to provide cover for themselves. They're living in a state of semi-terror most of the time. Nonetheless, I think the amount of progress has in fact been huge. I mean, when those early homophilers, as we call them, the pre-Stonewall movement, when they stood up, and it always angers me that their efforts are minimized, they stood up without a supportive movement. You know, a handful of people in 1965 were picketing the White House. I mean, they could have been beaten to death, literally on the spot. Now there's a very courageous people.
What ought to be the top of the agenda for the gay and lesbian movement today?
Freedom, as opposed to just a few rights, a few crumbs, you know.
But freedom defined in terms of across the board, or do you have within the umbrella of freedom some specific, whether it would be gay marriages or gays in the military or any particular...
No. Let's not even go there, please.
Well, as an
African-American...
Well, that's a different agenda from yours. What do you mean by that, just before...
Well, some of us, including myself, think the campaign for military justice was, to some large measure, misguided. It narrowed our agenda.
Counterproductive, or...
And counterproductive, yeah.
Okay.
As an African-American, my definition of freedom was shaped very early. It had nothing to do with lesbian or gay liberation or the women's movement.
It had everything to do with being
It had to do with race, and it had to do with a society that fundamentally oppressed people because of color. As far as our status,
no, as far as your own mindset.
No, I see things as pretty much as they were.
Race. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I'm more likely to be discriminated because of race, because that's what people see first. They're not thinking, here's this female, here's this lesbian. Often they might not know. Sometimes I get called sir, sometimes I get called ma'am. Doesn't really make any difference to me. But the thing is that what they see is a black descending. The point I want to make now, though, is not which of the oppressions is most severe, but to talk about what I mean by freedom. And by freedom, what I mean, and I think what Marty means, and probably what Jim means too, from what I read, you know, in the book about your politics, what we mean is freedom across the board for everyone who is living lives of hell. Okay. That's what we mean. So the thing is that, for me, a viable lesbian and gay liberation movement wants that mother who is out on the street as we speak with no place to live and separated from her children because of her poverty and her homelessness. I know that I can't be free unless that person has the opportunity to live a decent life.
Well,
and it's the same thing that happened with GLF and then the groups that splintered from it.
What's
you know?
DLF?
GLF.
The gay liberation.
Yeah,
Oh.
right.
I also think, I mean, if I may just put in one word here, I also think what's essential is that the gay lesbian movement is giving everyone the right to be as different as in fact they are. I don't think it's only gays and lesbians who are different. I mean, we are all, in our contradictory impulses and our fantastical heads, we are all very different, one from the other. But in this conformist society, we don't usually get the permission. And gays and lesbians are opening up this whole area of celebrating diversity. And that's why what we have to contribute to the mainstream is of such fundamental significance.
And that's why kids in college can call themselves queer without ever having slept with a person of their own gender. They say, I'm not, you know, a lesbian, I'm not gay, I'm queer because I see things differently, I feel things differently.
Okay, last word, what do you think, Jim, that might be
Well,
different
first
from
of all,
what
I
has
think
been
we have to
expressed
learn
with respect to
we
where
have
the priorities ought to be and what's
we
the
have
most
to learn from
important
our
goal?
mistakes. I think it's real important that political people always go back and look at what we've done, what we've accomplished, and what we haven't accomplished. And as a radical, and I self-identify as a radical, and as a person where a multi-issued gay liberation movement is important to me, meaning that it's just not about gay rights. I think we also need to see how the right wing in this country, and the Christian right wing, has set the agenda. And we're all reacting to it.
Particularly targeting the black community these days.
And I would like to say that I do not believe that gay and lesbian people are just like heterosexual people. I do not believe that Irish people that I grew up with are like Italian people, for example. I do not think that African American people and Hispanic people are just like. But this is we have cultural diversity that crosses class and internationally crosses cultures, that resonates love. I mean, this is going to sound, I don't know how my political friends are going to sound. This is a movement about love. It's about the ability to love a person of the same sex. And because that is anathemized by the right wing and by the religious movements around the world, we have to begin to fight back. And I would just suggest to any young person who's trying to define themselves today, don't let anyone define for you what it means to be gay or lesbian. Find out for yourself.
And get active.
And look at who we are. You know, we are black,
not all white,
we are
not
black,
all male
we are
either.
brown,
That's
we
very
are old,
important.
we are
Very
young,
important.
we are women, we are conservatives, and we are Democrats, we are Republicans, we are all very different. I want a society where I can live with equality with every other kind of person. I do not want that says I have to act this way or that way, nor do I dictate that to someone else.
Unfortunately, because I have other guests speaking to some of the same subjects, I have to go. I thank you very much.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure to have you here. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Joining me now to continue our discussion of Stonewall and the modern gay movement are Tony and Pulitzer Award winner, playwright Tony Kushner, Andrew Sullivan, editor of the New Republic magazine, Bruce Bauer, author of A Place at the Table, and Village Voice writer and lesbian activist Donna Minkowitz. I'm pleased to have each of you here. There is strong disagreement at this table. I want you to engage that disagreement. And I begin, Andrew, since tell me what is the essential disagreement in terms of where the movement is right now and what it ought to be emphasized and not emphasizing, and what is the conflict within the movement?
Well, I think I don't want to put words into other people's mouths. What I think the movement is about affirming the equal dignity of human beings who happen to be born and grow up loving someone of the same sex, and finding a way for our society to recognize that emotional integrity and that human dignity. It doesn't have to be about a whole range of other issues which are hangover from the new left of the late 60s and the accident of how the gay movement collided with that in the late 60s. And it's about affirming that we are like everybody else, that we are human beings, worthy of respect and love, that can have real relationships and real jobs, and be part of our society, that we are assimilated. We grew up in straight families. We have straight friends. We are part of America.
Is part of what you're saying, though, then, that those who emphasize differences in terms of that might come out in things like gay pride parades and other places,
no, I don't,
those things are destructive to achieving the goals of the gay movement?
I think that the key issue here is distinguishing culture and politics. I'm in favor of as big a flourishing and a wider diversity of activities and people and lifestyles and cultures as imaginable. But when you have to actually address the politics of a country like America, you have to get serious. You have to start talking about things that actually can be negotiated, things that actually can be had in common with other people, rather than constantly harping on what sets us apart. And harping on what sets us apart is victimizing gay kids across the country who are in regular families and want to lead regular lives.
Tony.
Well, I mean, I think that there's a distinction that you're making between culture and politics that I don't think holds up. I think that culture is political, and I don't think that the dividing line that you like to make works, because what you have to do in order to make that division, and what I think you did in your article last year, is to basically say that politics is a sort of a small service event that serves to cover up and correct limited wrongs, and that somehow then there's this giant sea of human phenomena called culture that isn't part of political activism. But I mean, as a playwright, I have to say
I don't want to see politics enforcing culture. That's what the religious right wants. What the religious right wants is to use politics to enforce a cultural view of the way people should be.
Well,
and what the left wants,
what they want to do is to use government to enforce it,
the same thing. What you want to do is use government to enforce it as well.
No, I don't. No, I want to use government to guarantee individual dignity and to guarantee
we're in agreement.
We're in agreement to that point. But
the question is, what kind of politics? I mean, the main disagreement, as I see it, is whether the gay movement should align itself with other groups that are also disenfranchised, with the poor, with women, with people of color. You know, Bruce in his book has said that we need a place at the table, but in fact what we need to do is overturn the table. The table isn't serving lots and lots of other groups. Everyone's underneath the table scrambling for crumbs. What we need to do is build a new table, and I would also argue...
Well, wait, stop. Let Bruce jump in, because everybody else has had a chance to speak, and since we brought in his view, we ought to have him speak to it.
Thank you. You mentioned the word diversity, Charlie, and the thing that strikes me as one of the ironies in this whole situation is that the gay left talks so much about diversity, but it uses this word solidarity as this ideal of what they want. And what they mean is solidarity according to their own politics. Gay people are supposed to all agree with the gay left politics. The thing is, gay people are diverse. The gay population in this country is as diverse as the straight population in this country. The huge majority of gay people do not share the exact political agendas of Tony Kushner and Donna Minkwitz, or, for that matter, me and Andrew.
I mean, Tony's article uses the word capitalism as a dirty word. I mean, Tony and Donna are from the extreme left in this country.
Well, I think
and there's no reason why someone, because they fall in love with someone of their own sex, should adhere to the view that capitalism and free market democracy are flawed.
Tony.
I think that you guys set up a number of paper tigers, and one of them is sort of the politics of the left, as though there's one politics of the left. I have only met Donna today. I like her work very much, but I'm sure that we diverge on many, many issues. The politics of the left is a very complicated thing. I think that the one thing that the left asks is that people don't stop asking questions, and that you keep exploring what the implications of your own situation are in the world at large. And I don't think that the politics that you're espousing is doing that. There's no...
How does it stop people asking questions?
Because I don't think it stops people asking questions.
The liberal society I support is all about asking questions. It's questioning the dogmas that you have as well as the dogmas that I have.
Asking questions at a very critical point. I think that you go up to the point where you can see the immediate gains that could be made by a kind of consolidation of lesbian and gay politics at this point if we cast ourselves off from other people who are struggling for their own liberations. You think that we are weighing ourselves down by concerning ourselves with things that are not
These
proper,
struggles you're talking about are
appropriate to us.
very different struggles. They
I don't
have
agree
very
with that.
different
You
trajectories.
call it an accident. You call it the fact that Stonewall happened in 1969 an accident. Stonewall could not have happened at any other point in American history except 1969. The three people that were on here before us gave eloquent testimony to that. It isn't an accident of history.
But they also gave eloquent testimony to a tradition of argument about homosexuality and protest about homosexuality in this country before that for like a century and a half. And it's not as if the argument about who gay people are began in 1969 at all.
But nobody's saying that.
I'm glad you brought that up because one question is, when did gay people begin? You talk about gay people being born and it being an accident of birth, but in fact, historians, gay and lesbian historians like Martin Duberman, believe very strongly that the homosexuals we know it only came into being in the 19th century. That in ancient Greece and
you agree with,
no,
you
I'm
agree
going
with
to
the
finish.
religious right,
and in the in some ways I do.
You do.
And in
you
the Middle
believe it's
Ages.
a choice.
Let me finish.
That's actually not.
You and
in
Jerry
many
Falwell
other
have a lot in
cultures,
common. You need each other.
In many other cultures, and most of history before the 19th century, there were not homosexual persons. There were certain acts like sodomy. In Puritan America, your straight grandmother might be considered as likely to commit an act of homosexual sodomy as anyone else. So, and there's also, it's very, it's also,
there are many
the
historians that
mainstream
argue
of gay and lesbian history believes this. But the main point, I mean, it's also significant that most of the people who take your viewpoint that it's very bad to discuss choice as a possibility in becoming gay or lesbian are men, because many, many lesbians believe that they have chosen a way of life that allows them not to be subservient to men. And you know, in the 70s, many lesbians chose a lesbian lifestyle, and I think it's important to say that. Doesn't mean that everyone chooses, but I don't think it's harming anything to say that sexuality is fluid.
When you say, for my benefit, when you say chose a gay lesbian lifestyle, what do you mean? In terms of chose not because with free choice at a certain age that they preferred a gay lesbian lifestyle. Is that what you mean?
Yes,
and what do you mean by lifestyle?
With a fairly free choice. Many women who were in heterosexual marriages, and to them it felt like a heterosexual choice. They could feel an attraction to men, they could feel an attraction to women. They decided to live a lesbian lifestyle. And I hate the word lifestyle actually, but I mean, well, in fact, I don't agree that each of us has a natural sexual identity, a fundamental thing, and
the huge majority of gay people feel very strongly that their homosexuality is something that is innate, natural, constitutive.
I disagree. Talk to some lesbians.
The people who agree with you on this are completely political. They're people who have a certain left politics, and their homosexuality is an aspect of their politics.
You just sound, when you say they have a certain left politics, you sound like somebody from the McCarthy period. I'm sorry, but you do.
No.
It's this demonizing thing. No, but it isn't ridiculous. It isn't ridiculous.
You are stuck in the McCarthy period. You can't actually think again of what the possibilities for gay people are in the 90s. You're just stuck in the late 60s.
I think
that's your problem.
I think that your sense of what possibilities are for the 90s is that someday we can get married like heterosexual people, as though all gay people only want monogamous marriages.
But there are certain
that we can serve in the military, which is also problematic.
And this is a matter of wanting to have the same rights as straight people, so that we can do that if we want it, and so that we can live as she does if we want to. However,
is that it? I mean, is that the only thing that we're fighting for?
One thing that a radical gay movement can do is give straight people things they don't already have. There are many things about the gay and lesbian liberation movement that could liberate straight people too, like from gender norms, from sexual repression. I mean, I say, no, actually, they're very much what the gay movement is concerned with.
But the more you bring in these other things, the more gay people are going to be alienated by it and aren't going to be a part of this movement, which should properly be seen as a movement simply for civil rights, for equal rights for gay people.
Barbara talking about Betty Friedan saying, at one point, a feminist leader saying lesbians are a danger to feminism. Aren't you worried that in like 20 years people are going to be saying that about the two of you? Because, I mean, you're asking us to say, at this point, it's too dangerous to include other struggles in our struggle.
It's a different issue. It's just categorically different. I have no objection to a variety of lifestyles. The gay rights movement is about making sure that nothing is forbidden us that is given to heterosexuals.
I actually do believe of you. I do believe of you that you don't have an objection to. I think that you wrote very movingly in your article about racism. I thought, really, really terrifically. So I'm not saying that I think that you're a racist. I am saying, however, that I do think that you're being somewhat disingenuous when you say that you don't think it's a danger, because I think that you are saying that when you said earlier, before the cameras were rolling, that we haven't gained anything because we've been too, and you say in your article that the left is always sort of losing its energy because it's casting its glance in too many directions. That's to say, but that is to say, it's a danger to cast your glance in too many directions.
It's not because of different directions. It fails because it mistakes, to make this point again, politics for culture. And so it's a politics of theater. It's not a politics of argument. And until you have a politics of argument, you will not get the basic gains for gay men and lesbians who really want to live lives as equal people in this country.
In your piece in The Nation, you quoted Oscar Wilde to the effect that a politics that does not include utopia in its map, that kind of map is not even worth looking at. I think the whole problem with gay politics is that it's been guided for too long, in too many cases, by people who are going by a map with utopia as the goal. We need to turn this politics around so that we're using a real map of the real world.
A real map, as though a real map could never. I mean, you're shortening your imagination. You're not asking for enough.
And my imagination is including what's possible.
You also have to think about who's gay. Gay people are poor people. Gay people are people of color. There's a 14-year-old lesbian who lives in the Bronx who writes to me, and she writes, you know, it's supposed to be okay. Everything's supposed to be okay with me now that Katie Lang is out. But Donna, you know, it's not okay, and I'm still suicidal.
But Donna, there are also disagreements, you know, just to be fair, about how one helps the poor, how one deals with race. It is not simply a question of whether you're for them or against them. There are many different arguments about how we might help the underclass, how we might deal with sexism, how we might. I mean, and just accept that it's not either you're for all these people or against these people. There's just a disagreement about what we can do.
But there's also a moral issue here. I believe that it's morally bankrupt to say, give me my rights, but not theirs, not theirs, and not theirs.
But I'm not saying that, and no one's saying that, and it's a terrible calumny to say that we are. We're saying these are these issues, these are these issues. Let us see the differences. Let us be intelligent about it. Instead of believing we're stuck in '69 and we have a summer of love.
But if you weren't white and if you weren't male, you might not be able to separate those aspects of yourself so easily. If you weren't white, you might not be able to think about, okay, now I'm going to think as a black man, now I'm going to think as a homosexual. You might not be able to draw that kind of a line down yourself and decide, you know, okay, well, the gay rights movement part of me will do this, and the black part of me will do that.
You're looking upon politics as this thing where all the right answers are on this side and all the wrong answers are on that side, and that we all have to buy into this one column A here. And it doesn't work that way. Each of us as individuals should look at each issue separately and see which we think is the best route to take.
Let me bring Tony in to come right to you.
I just think something's being stood on its head here. It's that the left is constantly being represented as, I mean, this is sort of the political correctness bashing, that the left is being represented as being, you know, incredibly monofocal and single issue and demanding a certain kind of thought. What we're asking for is an expansion of thought, not a limitation of thought.
No,
you're talking about a real politics. I agree with Donna that it's morally bankrupt. I also agree that it's in terms of pragmatics, it's bankrupt, because I don't think that we're going to get. What's bankrupt? I think that to simply say that short-term strategizing around what Andrew calls eliminating proactive discrimination, which is gays in the military and the ban on marriages, is not enough. It's very important, but it's not enough. And that if we only get those things, we will still be, as gay people, suffering terribly. When I say that capitalism is a dirty word, maybe you don't agree that capitalism is a dirty word, but something is truly...
Anybody does in this country, Tony.
No, you know, actually,
if you want to be pragmatic, you've got to start engaging America, not engaging the West
20 million
Village.
people who live on the streets in this country think that capitalism is a problem. Maybe they don't know the word capitalism. Some of them do, some of them don't. But they think that it's a problem.
You try getting elected president arguing capitalism is a dirty word.
I do know.
Just
I do know that if
get
AIDS,
real.
for instance, has environmental cofactors, and if the environment is crumbling, and if there's a reason for the environmental disintegration that's going on, it is my concern as a gay man, as well as a human being, that the environment is collapsing, and I have to be able to think that large to be able to think small. What are you aiming for? What are you going for? It's not enough that we have gay soldiers.
Many gay people, for example, are quite religious. When you ask them what are they going for, they talk about their religious faith. And they understand that religious faith is separate than politics. For many people from the 60s, for many people from that period, politics is religion. And they cannot see that a whole new generation has a different view of the world. They're not right-wingers. They're just people who exist in a different world, in a different climate. And they're the people we're trying to reclaim the gay movement for.
But where is that divide? I'm sorry, because Donna, you were going to say something.
I just want to get back to what you were saying, Tony, about the practical reason to not divide, not have a narrow conception of the gay rights movement. Look at what the religious right is doing. They've organized an amazing, well-funded campaign against us. 10 states will have anti-gay ballot initiatives on the ballot in 1994.
By being extremely
focused.
Well,
in fact, they're able to
and
organize.
You want us to dissipate our energies
in the black community and among poor people because the gay movement, for the most part, nationwide, has ignored those communities. Because the gay movement has bought on to the image of us as, oh, we're all rich. Oh, gay people should get rights because we're affluent, because we can afford them, because you will sell things to us. Therefore, the Christian... No, excuse me. The Gay Games took an ad in Advertising Age magazine that said, the gay games, the way to reach the affluent gay market. Now, what affluent gay market? What about the non-affluent gay people? And the religious right used that issue in Colorado. That is why they won in Colorado, because they painted gay people as wealthier and more privileged than everyone else.
But how do you deal with the fact, for example, that levels of disapproval of homosexuality are far higher among black Americans by every poll than among white Americans? How do you bridge your coalition when you find that, in fact, racially, some of the biggest enemies of the gay rights movement are among minority populations?
Well, I'm not familiar...
Or are they just suffering from false consciousness?
I'm not familiar with those polls. I wouldn't say they were suffering from false consciousness. I think there also are polls
They agree with the religious right.
I think there also are polls in which black people favor gay rights. But the way to do it is not by ignoring the needs of the black community.
I don't want to ignore the needs of the black community.
I'd
like to see...
Or to ignore the parts of the black community that are lesbian or gay.
I want to see gay black leaders. I want to see black gay leaders. I mean, I see nothing wrong with that at all. I just don't want to see your...
Andrew, how do you respond to that? To those? I'm sorry,
there's no reason why a handful of leftists should be formulating a whole menu of
talking about a handful of leftists. I mean, what, you know, hello? Sorry.
Well, not maybe in the circles you move in, you don't hear that, but most gay people in America, will listen to the things that you two are saying and really not identify all of them.
You know, I think that's actually not true. I would imagine Donna Minkowitz has a much larger readership than you do, and I think the more people who come to see Angels in America than will buy a place at the table. I mean, I don't want to get like,
no, I don't want you to either. It's unbecoming.
But what he's doing though is pushing us into the margins.
Right,
saying, this is a minority viewpoint, and it's not.
Angels in America are among those very affluent gay people that Donna Minkowitz looks down on.
Well, and in fact, the gay historian John D'Amelio has said there are more of us, more lesbians and gay men than there used to be, and there will continue to be more of us. So if there's not a fixed number, and there also are more ones. And if our numbers grow, we don't have to think of ourselves as this fixed group who you seem to be referring to.
Let me just make this one thing. I'm going to invite Ian McKellen, who speaks eloquently to these issues and other issues, to join us at this table if he would like, or we can do a separate thing, but we don't break here for commercials. But I want to continue this conversation, invite Ian to come in here, and we'll take a break here in just a moment to do that. But let me just get this one last point. Here is what having listened to all of this, I mean, is it what you two are saying, bottom line, is that you want to speak to issues of liberation and equality without necessarily assuming you have the same political views on other issues that Tony does and Donna does?
Yeah, I want formal equality for gay people and lesbians, and that's what the gay movement should be about. I have no problem with people in the culture at large expressing themselves in whatever way they want. That's the glory, I think, of a free market and a liberal democracy. You know, it's no accident that one of the least left-wing countries in the world, the United States, has one of the strongest gay movements, because the market in a free society allows for individuals to find their own destiny the way they want. That's what America's about. That's what I think the gay movement should be about.
All right, Tony, last word in terms of what you have learned and listened here today.
I think
what
that,
you go away
again,
from this with.
I think that, again, the people that are claiming that there's been this sort of leftist domination are also the people that are now saying this is what the gay movement should be about, which is not putting words in your mouth, which is what, in fact, you just said. The gay movement should be about whatever gay people and lesbian people are about.
In all of that diversity.
And it reflects an immense diversity, and I think that diversity will inevitably move us in all sorts of directions.
Bruce, quickly.
Diversity is an important word to me. The gay population in this country is incredibly diverse, including politically diverse. Gay people have the same political range that straight people have, from conservative to very left. And simply, if the more we try to tie gay politics, gay equal rights to a very left-leaning agenda, the more gay people are going to be alienated from it, and the less effective it can be.
The gay movement is not just about sexuality, it's also about gender. The gay movement is about men who are feminine and women who are masculine, and creating a space for that. That's why the gay movement can be liberating for everyone, including straight people who don't want to be bound by gender norms.
I thank each of you for coming and contributing to this conversation. This is the 25th anniversary of Stonewall, number one. Number two, it's we're approaching gay games, and Ian McKellen is coming up now to a one-man show, A Night Out. We'll be back in just a moment with Ian McKellen. Thank you all. Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks. Forget that Britain's Sir Ian McKellen is considered his generation's successor to Sir Laurence Olivier. Never mind the Tony he won on Broadway for playing Salieri in Peter Shaffer's Amadeus. Also forget about McKellen being a record 5-time recipient of Britain's Tony, the Olivier Awards. Sir Ian is out and about in his one-man show, A Night Out, benefiting the Gay Games Cultural Festival taking place this week in New York City, and I'm very pleased to have him here back at this table. Welcome.
It must be a relief after those four.
I issued you an invitation to join.
I didn't accept it.
You certainly didn't.
I felt a little bit out.
And I just want to make a sense, in the sense that you did not. Our invitation was for you to come and engage in a one-on-one conversation, so that's why it's certainly appropriate for you to say, I want to talk about a variety of things.
I think I'm too much of a newcomer to this business of gay politics. I've only been completing my journey of coming out, of being totally honest about my sexuality 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, in fact, and I've made note of this before, I think the first time you really talked about it much on television was with me in London.
That's right, yes, it was. But the issues they're talking about seem to me as a little bit of an outsider, rather narrow. They're very much to do with American society, and although you would detect the division between what they call the right and the left in other countries, I think most of us in England, at any rate, much as we might be trying to change the laws, which everyone around that table would want to happen, and much as I enjoy discovering all sorts of people who support gay rights in the way that I support their rights in different areas of the culture. Actually, the people I'm most concerned about are people for whom that sort of conversation is totally irrelevant, because if they were to have it in the pub, or to have it in the classroom, or to have it even in the church or the Sunday school, they would find that they were drummed out of those institutions and thrown out of buildings. And those are the people I'm trying to address, and that's the importance of shows like yours, which will give lonely people right across this nation a sense that there will be a time when they can belong and have the privilege of disagreeing amongst people who are openly gay. And of course, most gays and lesbians in this country are too frightened to be open about their sexuality.
Have you, and it does not prove one case or the other, I know that one of the reasons you delayed coming out was because you had been hammered, it had been hammered into your head in Hollywood and other places that if in fact you came out, it would affect your career opportunities, correct? What has it done to your career opportunities?
It's not just actors who are told that if they come out, they'll lose their job. Politicians are told the same thing. Oh, they wouldn't get re-elected. Time and again, that's proved to be false. And my career seems to have taken off in most alarmingly interesting directions.
I know that, so what does that say?
Well, I think it just says that I've got a knighthood and I'm 55 years old, and you know, I'm fairly secure in the upper branches of my profession. It's for the young people that one has to look to see if there's been any shift. Now, Stephen Spinella has just won the Tony 2 years running, and he's an openly gay man. There are many young gay actors having similar successes in the United Kingdom. And the theatre, of course, is an easier proposition than television and film, who are playing to much larger audiences, and where producers and managements are looking to, frankly, a lower common denominator, which includes lower common prejudice. And they would like the world to be homogeneous. They would like everyone to be the same, so that everyone will buy the product that's on sale during the intermission of the show. And so there is great pressure, even from producers and managers and agents who are themselves openly gay, to say to their clients, the actors, please, no, stay where you are or you'll upset the apple cart.
Tell me about a night out.
A night out. Well, I talk about these issues, and
yeah, I mean, it really. Go ahead.
Yeah, Knight with a K.
Yeah.
So
yes.
I can talk a little
so
bit
it's
about.
a play on being Sir Ian.
Yes, it is, and
out is a play on being outed.
Yes, and what the relationship is in my life between being an actor and now, rather late in the day, being an activist, and so the show is divided really into two parts between my ambition to be a very good actor, having a gay life in private, and making no connection between the two. And of late, just 5 years ago, beginning to see that my acting, the reasons I became an actor, which were to express myself in a way that I couldn't do about myself personally. Somehow, when I took on the disguise of the character, I was able to be as open as everybody else. Being an actor was related to the fact that I had this big secret, and yet being someone who wanted to shout about himself. Now, that's absolutely reconciled, and I find myself finding as much satisfaction speaking about sexuality in forums like this, but also on stage in my one-person show, as I ever have in disguise playing Coriolanus or Hamlet or Macbeth.
Well, speaking of that, where were you when Stonewall happened 25 years ago?
I was at the Edinburgh International Festival doing the first play ever written about homosexuality, Christopher Marlowe's Edward II, in a blonde wig and a huge codpiece, and a busybodying Scottish official tried to get the show closed down because
men were kissing on stage.
Yeah, in 1969. And he sent the police down, and the police stayed to cheer, and all that happened was that we had full houses for the rest of the run. But while the drag queens were throwing off the police in Greenwich Village, there were these theatre queens.
Yeah, did you take note of that?
Not at all. I knew nothing about Stonewall for years later. Yeah. I noted in today's paper Margareta Kammermeyer, the heroine, perhaps the greatest woman soldier in the American Army, just back in service now.
Exactly.
Said that until the last few years she knew nothing about Stonewall, and many of us of our generation were cut off. And I see my job within the gay rights movement being nothing more than trying to alert people who are as cut off as I was in the past to realize that there is something going on. It's generally happening in the metropolitan areas.
Now, what is going on?
What is going on is that there is it is increasingly easier for people to stick up for themselves and say, I'm gay, whether you like it or not. It's increasingly easier in the metropolitan areas, in the big cities. And it's increasingly easier throughout the world. We think of setbacks and think of we're getting nowhere and we're being attacked by our enemies. But if you look at the situation globally, which is a good thing to do during these gay games when people have come from all over the world to New York, last year, Ireland repealed every single bit of anti-gay legislation that the British Empire left behind in the 1920s, and they did it without a popular movement. It was an initiative of one person, a senator who took his case to the European Court. Gay marriages or partnerships are now on a par with straight marriages in Scandinavia.
In terms of all benefits and things like that?
Yes. In Israel, gays and lesbians openly serve in perhaps the most efficient army in the world. The new Constitution of South Africa establishes equal rights for all. These are huge advances, and you have to see them as all being connected, and there is a general movement forward. And I think we can take encouragement from that. And the inspiration for it all is that one word, Stonewall. Yes. That's why.
What are the gay games about, and what's the significance of them? Because I know you're going to participate in the closing ceremonies. Are you not?
Well, I opened my show by saying that I have a lifelong aversion to athleticism.
I know.
When I was a teenager, I never went through that familiar phase of experimenting with athletics. And I'm not an athletophobe.
Do you regret that at all? Or?
What?
I mean, do you regret that at all?
You missed the joke, Charlie.
Yes, I did.
No, the joy of these games is that, quite contrary to the normal American spirit, winning is not the point, and I really do support that. Because it's not about being best. It is very much a straight concept, you know, of the world. And straights have been trying to tell gays that they are best and we are somehow inferior. And I like the idea of people competing against themselves, not against the other person, but doing it in the company of other people who care as much about the same activity. That's a nice metaphor to the world I enjoy living in. But I personally don't want to be a participant, though I did go and see the ice skating yesterday, and to see two men dancing together in a very loving and very artistic way seemed to me unastonishing, until I realized afterwards that those two men have to rehearse in secret in Montreal, because if they were seen by general members of the public at their ice rink, they would have things thrown at them, if not be thrown off the rink. That's the situation that we're constantly facing.
Tell me about the poem.
Well, A. Houseman, we can look back and discover that there were people who, were they alive today, would identify themselves as gay, and A. Houseman, author of Shropshire Lad, I suppose, is one of them. And his direct reaction to the conviction of Oscar Wilde 100 years ago, being put in prison for 2 years for making love, was to say, the laws of God, the laws of man, he may keep that will and can, not I. Let God and man decree laws for themselves and not for me, and if my ways are not as theirs, let them mind their own affairs. Their deeds I judge and much condemn, yet when did I make laws for them? Please yourselves, say I, and they need only look the other way.
Sir Ian McKellen, at a night's at the Lyceum Theatre. How long will you be there?
I'm just on Saturday for the afternoon performance, then I'm going to the Gay Games
Great
final.
to see you.
Nice
As
to see you,
always.
Charlie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us this evening. We look forward to seeing you on Monday. See you then.
Major funding for Charlie Rose was provided by DuPont, originator of products and ideas that make a difference in everyday life. DuPont, better things for better living. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and the annual financial support of viewers like you. Charlie Rose was also made possible by these funders. To order Charlie Rose program transcripts for $5 each and video cassettes for $29.95 each, call 1-800-825-5746 or write to Journal Graphics at the address on your screen. Please indicate show date and guest. This is PBS.